You don't usually ask this question out loud, not because it's unimportant, but because something inside you already knows how unsettling it is. Where does everything come from? Not just the stars, not just the universe, but everything, including you, your thoughts, your fears, your need to understand. There are moments, quiet, almost invisible moments, when this question slips through. Maybe late at night, maybe when you're staring at the sky, maybe when life feels too heavy to carry and you start wondering if any of this even makes sense. And in those moments, something deeper is happening. You're not just asking a scientific question, you're asking a psychological one. Because the truth is, the question, where does everything come from, is also a question about control, certainty, and your place in a reality that doesn't owe you answers. And that can feel terrifying. So most people don't stay there. They rush to answers, religion, science, philosophy, quick conclusions, clean narratives, comfortable beliefs. But what if the discomfort is the point? What if the unease you feel isn't a problem to solve, but a doorway? Because when you sit with this question long enough, without rushing to escape it, you begin to notice something unexpected. You begin to notice yourself. There's a reason why thinkers like Richard Feynman approach this question differently. He didn't try to give you a final answer. He didn't pretend the universe was a neat, finished story. Instead, he leaned into something most people avoid: uncertainty. And that's where this becomes psychological, because your mind is not designed to be comfortable with uncertainty. It craves closure. It craves explanations. It craves a sense that things are under control. And when it doesn't get that, it starts creating stories. Stories about beginnings, stories about causes, stories that make the infinite feel manageable. But here's the part most people don't realize. Those stories are not just about the universe. They're about protecting you. Think about it. If everything has a clear origin, then everything is predictable. If everything is predictable, then you're safe. And if you're safe, then you don't have to confront the deeper truth. That existence itself might not have a simple why. That things might not begin the way you expect them to. That the universe might not be a neatly wrapped gift with a clear label. And that threatens your sense of control. So your mind does something very subtle. It doesn't ask, what is true? It asks, what feels stable enough for me to believe? This is where the manipulation begins, not from others, but from within. Your own mind starts filtering reality. It prefers answers that reduce anxiety over answers that increase understanding. And you see this everywhere. People arguing about how the universe started, not because they're purely curious, but because they need their version to be right. Because being right feels like being safe, and being safe feels like being in control. But the question you're asking right now, where does everything come from? Doesn't play by those rules. It doesn't give you certainty. It takes it away. And that's where something profound happens. If you stay with the question, really stay with it, you start to notice a shift. At first, it feels like falling, like you're losing ground, like the world is becoming less solid. But then, something changes. You realize that what you're losing isn't truth. You're losing illusions. Because the deeper you go, the more you begin to see that the idea of a beginning might not be what you think it is. You imagine a starting point, a moment when everything suddenly appeared. But even that idea raises another question. What came before that? And before that? And before that? It becomes an endless loop, a question that eats its own answer. And this is exactly what Richard Feynman pointed toward in his own way, not by giving a final explanation, but by showing that the deeper you look, the more reality resists simple answers. Now pause for a second. Notice how that makes you feel. Not what you think, but what you feel. There's a slight tension, isn't there? A subtle discomfort, maybe even a quiet frustration. That feeling matters, because it reveals something about you. It shows you how deeply your mind is wired to seek closure, and how uncomfortable it becomes when closure is out of reach. This is the same mechanism that operates in your relationships, the same one that makes you overthink someone's behavior, the same one that pushes you to find explanations for why someone treated you a certain way. Because uncertainty feels like a threat. So you create stories. They didn't care. I wasn't enough. They always do this. Not necessarily because those stories are true, but because they feel complete. And completeness feels like relief. But here's the truth most people never confront. Closure is not the same as truth. And sometimes, the stories you tell yourself to feel safe are the very things keeping you stuck. Now bring that back to the universe. When you ask, where does everything come from? Are you looking for truth? Or are you looking for relief? Because those are not always the same thing. The universe, as far as we can understand it, doesn't owe you a comforting narrative. It doesn't simplify itself to match your psychological needs. It doesn't slow down so you can feel in control. And that realization can feel deeply unsettling. But it can also be freeing. Because if the universe is not obligated to make sense in a way that comforts you, then you are not obligated to force meaning where there may be none. You are not required to have all the answers. You are not broken for not understanding everything. And this is where something powerful begins to emerge. When you stop demanding certainty, you create space for something else. Curiosity, real curiosity, the kind that isn't driven by fear, but by openness, the kind that doesn't need immediate answers, the kind that can sit with a question and let it breathe. And this changes the way you experience everything, not just the universe, but your own life. Because suddenly, not knowing isn't a weakness, it's a state of awareness. Think about how much of your stress comes from needing things to make sense, needing people to be predictable, needing outcomes to be certain, needing your life to follow a clear path, and how exhausting that is. Now imagine letting go of that need. Not completely, but even slightly. Imagine allowing some things to remain unanswered. Imagine trusting yourself, even without complete clarity. That's what this question is really inviting you into. Not an answer, but a shift. And if you're still here, still listening, still thinking about this, that says something about you. It means you're willing to sit with discomfort. It means you're willing to question deeper layers of reality. And that's rare. So take a second. If this is resonating with you, if you've ever felt this quiet tension between wanting answers and sensing that the answers aren't enough, this is exactly the kind of space this channel is built for. You don't have to rush through these questions alone. Now let's go deeper, because there's another layer to this, and it's one most people never notice. When you ask where everything comes from, you assume that everything is something separate from you, something external, something out there. But what if that separation is part of the illusion? Because you are not outside the universe asking about it. You are inside it. You are part of it. Your thoughts, your questions, your awareness are all expressions of the same reality you're trying to understand. So the question becomes even more strange. Because now it's not just, where does everything come from? It's also, where do you come from? And even deeper, who is the one asking? And this is where things get uncomfortable in a different way, because now the focus turns inward. And when you look inward long enough, you start to notice something unsettling. Your sense of self, the you asking the question, is not as solid as it seems. Your thoughts come and go. Your emotions shift. Your identity changes over time. The person you were 5 years ago is not the same person you are now. And yet, something feels continuous. Something feels like you. But what is that? Where does that come from? Notice how the question keeps folding in on itself. The deeper you go, the less clear the boundaries become, between self and universe, between question and answer, between observer and observed. And this is exactly why this question has such a strong emotional impact. Because it doesn't just challenge your understanding of the universe, it challenges your understanding of yourself. And when that happens, your mind tries to pull back. It tries to reestablish stability. It tries to return to familiar ground. That's why most people stop here. They feel the edge, and they step back. They return to simpler explanations, simpler identities, simpler narratives. But you don't have to. You can stay here a little longer, not to find a final answer, but to notice something deeper. That beneath all the questions, beneath all the uncertainty, there's still awareness, there's still presence, there's still you experiencing all of this. And maybe that's the closest thing to an answer you'll ever get. Not a story about where everything comes from, but a direct experience of being part of it. Because the truth is, the universe might not be a thing that started. It might be a process that's happening, right now, through everything, including you. And when you see it that way, the question changes. It's no longer about tracing everything back to a single point. It's about recognizing that you are already inside the unfolding. You don't need to find the beginning to understand your place. You are the place. And that realization, quietly, gently, takes away the pressure. You don't have to solve existence. You don't have to figure out the ultimate origin. You don't have to force meaning into every corner of reality. You just have to be present enough to notice it. And from that place, something unexpected happens. The fear begins to fade, not because you found certainty, but because you no longer need it in the same way. You begin to trust yourself differently, not as someone who has all the answers, but as someone who can exist without them. And that is a different kind of strength, a quieter one, a deeper one. So the next time this question comes to you, late at night, in silence, in stillness, don't rush to escape it. Don't silence it with quick answers. Let it stay. Let it open something in you. Because maybe the question isn't there to be solved. Maybe it's there to wake you up. And if you've made it this far, you're already beginning to see it. So stay curious, stay open, and most importantly, stay honest with yourself. Because in a universe that may never fully explain itself, your ability to sit with truth without needing to control it is the closest thing to clarity you'll ever find, and that is more than enough.